Welcome to the Film Trooper podcast with your host, Scott McMahon.
Hi, and welcome to the Film Trooper podcast, Filmmaking Freedom for the Independent. This episode is sponsored by the book, How to Make and Sell Your Film Online and Survive the Hollywood Implosion While Doing It. It's available in paperback, as a Kindle ebook, as well as an audiobook. In fact, you can get the audiobook for free when you go to survivetheimplosion.com and sign up with Audible for the first 30 days. Again, that's at survivetheimplosion.com. Today's episode is entitled, How to Find the Concept for Your Next Movie with Brooks Elms, Part 1. This is actually a continuation of episodes number 111 and 112, which was entitled, What If Your Script Sucks? The idea was to try to implement Pixar's process of story development with the use of their brain trust sessions. Again, if you're not familiar with the Pixar brain trust sessions, they essentially allow whoever the lead is on that particular story to present it to the other creative leads to generate feedback and brainstorming. But it's different than a screenwriter presenting the latest draft to a studio and having the suits and the lawyers and the marketers, etc., give notes on the script, and then that screenwriter having to try and incorporate all those notes. But with Pixar, if you're presenting your story idea, you would have John Lasseter, director of Toy Story and the founder of Pixar, listening in, as well as Andrew Stanton, the writer and director of Finding Nemo and WALL-E. He'll be there, as well as Brad Bird, the writer-director of Incredibles, Iron Giant, and Pete Docter, writer and director of Monsters, Inc., Up and Inside Out. So you would have all these heavyweights, and there's no hierarchy. I mean, everyone is there to help tell a better story. And there is candid, open discussions of what's working and what's not working with your story. But here's the kicker. You as a story lead don't have to incorporate any of the feedback from those sessions. But hopefully the process in openly discussing your story with the masters at the craft, you'll discover and be inspired to fix what needs to be fixing. So back in episodes number 111 and 112, I shared my latest script with you, with the Film Trooper audience. And I actually created an audio performance of it with sound effects and music. That way you didn't have to read it. And then I held my own version of the Brain Trust group with some of my fellow podcasters. Well, I was approached by my past guest, Brooks Elms, who back in episode number 104, entitled How to Sell Your Script, offered to help me rework my overall concept. Now, Brooks and I discussed how he sold a script to Gold Circle. They produced My Big Fat Greek Wedding and many other films. Anyhow, since Brooks has been working with me, he sold another script. Now, Brooks listened in on my brain trust session, and he identified that I may need to go back to the concepting stage. And Brooks offers script consultation and teaches occasionally at UCLA. So in this episode, you'll get to hear how one of his consulting sessions work, and you see how you can apply his teachings to finding your next movie concept, or just hire him yourself. And I'll supply all that info at the end of the episode. Anyway, what you'll hear is how he needs me to list and talk about 5 of my favorite films and then why I love them. Then he helps identify what made those films unique in their concepts. Then I needed to provide him 3 films that most relate to the kind of film I'm trying to make, and we discuss and analyze why those films work or don't work. But at the end of my session with Brooks, I actually take what he asked me to do and present my work back to my brain trust. So you'll hear that in this episode as well. Now, this is part 1 of finding your next movie concept. In part 2, you'll hear how taking the brainstorming of ideas and how to identify which concepts are worth pursuing. I personally love episodes like this, podcast episodes like this, because they act like a case study of the creative process. And by applying some techniques like the ones Brooks Elms will show us, it helps demystify the process and make it more tangible and make it more like work, but work you love to do. Anyhow, I hope you get a lot of value out of these next 2 episodes. And if you haven't listened into episodes number 111 and 112, I recommend going back to them in order to have a better context of what is being discussed in today's episode. So without further ado, here is my returning guest, screenwriter and filmmaker Brooks Elms, here on the Film Trooper podcast.
General context, I listened to some of the presentation of the script, so I have a sense of what your original idea was. I listened to the Brain Trust podcast, and I liked what those guys were saying in general. And I think the opportunities for you are are pretty significant if you kind of, as you're planning to do anyway, is kind of step back a little bit and kind of, rethink it from the conceptual level and then kind of rebuild it back upward, because this is a commonly overlooked opportunity, that concept level. And look, there's a lot of really great movies that have kind of a soft concept.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, but if you start with a really sharp concept that's really kind of in its essence is really intriguing, everything else gets a little bit less difficult from there on.
Oh yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking, and so I think the first step that might be helpful is to kind of get in there and define your sensibility and your sort of your unique view of what's great, because there's what critics think in general, there's what the box office says, but each individual has a different sense of what really drives them crazy in a good way,
right.
And in a bad way, And so I think getting into that a little bit, having discussion about that, and kind of might help you sort of get your sort of creative tuning fork cleaned up, so that you get a deeper sense of what, or at least a more present sense of what really turns you on as a person and as a filmmaker. So to do that, it helps to talk about your favorite movies. And
okay.
So first, if we could talk about 5 of your favorite movies of all time. And then we'll you tell me one, we'll talk about it a little bit, and then we'll go down the list to the 5, and then we can move on from there.
Do you want me to say all 5 or just go one at a time?
Let's do one at a time,
okay.
And then actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Do all 5, so there's a general kind of sense, because there's something really interesting, and I want to do this experiment online someday. I haven't yet. I want to put out my 10 favorite films of all time and see if there's anybody on the planet that has the exact same 10.
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
Almost certain that's not the case, but does somebody have 5 out of my top 10? I don't know. And if they have 5 out of my 10, is the order anyway? Because I think there's something about, again, your favorite movies of all time that really speak very deeply to your sensibility. So anyway, so give me your 5 in general, and then we'll go one by one and kind of get a sense of what really is special about those films for you.
Yeah, so these are 5, like say favorite, but they're favorites because I'll rewatch them over and over and still get enjoyment out of them. So Jaws, Rudy, Amadeus, Somewhere in Time, and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Excellent. So interesting. So my first thought in general is, so Jaws is 70s, Rudy was 80s, Amadeus is 80s, Somewhere in Time was that early 80s, like 81 or something?
Yeah, Rudy's in the 90s, like early 90s, but right.
Oh, it was early 90s,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. And then and Somewhere in Time was early 80s.
Yes.
And then 2001 I think is 68.
Exactly.
So it's interesting. So that's so it's a lot of older movies. So that's that's interesting. Good. All right, let's go back to Jaws, which, by the way, is still my favorite Spielberg film.
Yeah.
But what do you like about Jaws? Why is this on your list?
I think it's the adventure. I think there's this. It never felt like a traditional sort of horror film or like this thriller film. I mean, there is this innate fear of the water and the sharks and so on. And I grew up surfing, so that was always top of mind. The real life predator that's a real that exists. But that wasn't the whole thing. The characters themselves, I think. I think what it is that I didn't really understand why I loved Jaws until I saw J.J. Abrams' TED talk, where he talked about like the magic box or the mystery box that his uncle or his grandfather gave him. But he had this small snippet where he was explaining what Jaws was, where like we all see it as this story about a man-eating shark. And we always remember the scene of the girl, skinny dipping at night, getting, killed in the opening sequence. And that sets off what we think Jaws is. But he says what really the story is about this man dealing with his masculinity and his, overcoming his fears for his family and the town that he is supposed to protect in terms of Sheriff Brody. And he says that one of the greatest scenes that he shows is the one after he gets slapped in the face by the woman of the boy who was killed, and he knew about this, and he's drinking his worry, his disappointment in himself at the dinner table, and he has a small moment with his son where they just mimic each other. And it's just, and that's where he said, that's what the movie is. And I never really understood that until I saw, and I realized, I think that's probably why I love Jaws. There's layers of the need for all of us to overcome fear and having that ability to do it so in an adventure, and having to do that high adventure and have it against a true monster. I think there's just so many elements to it that just bring you back to that movie over and over again. And it's interesting, they had a rebroadcast, or they put it in the theaters last summer, and I was able to take my daughter to it. She never saw it, seen the movie in a big screen before. But after she saw that movie, she spent most of the summer walking around in this shark outfit that she picked up at Target. So, I mean, I think that's what resonates. When I look back, I know I can go back to it over and over again because there's such great characters. There's, how can you not love, Captain Quint? It's just like everybody lives for those moments of, of this, of the one-off of like what scars that, Hooper and Quint have. And it's such a brilliant, antagonistic, fun scene. And then he gets into the whole thing about the World War II ship that was bombed, and all the men were being attacked by sharks. Like, those things are so layered with such just interesting and dramatic fashion. And like I said, there's just so many things about that film that you could take away from it. Obviously, the music, the suspense, and so on. But I think that's what it is an appreciation for just like, even today, even though the shark is like campy and really rubbery and stuff like that, the raw elements of what make that film work still work. And I just love it for all that.
Excellent. So good. So that's great, and I can hear the energy and love when talking about all those different elements. So then, the $1 million question is, how was it the same but different, right? Because that's what really makes something, I think, really cut through the clutter. If it's too different, it's kind of too crazy, and people kind of dismiss it. If it's too same, people are like, oh, it's a hack job. We've seen that a million times. When something threads the needle in a really special way of the same but different, almost every popular movie is threading that needle in some way. Mm-hmm. So out of all the things you mentioned, or maybe something different, if you had to say one thing, maybe two of what was at the time it came out, the same but different, what might you say?
Well, I mean, when I first saw it as 3 years old and stuff like that, I think there was a connection to the shark. I mean, I remember coming from that and drawing the shark. So there's, even though we know it's a threat, there's still sort of this projection of something so powerful that, as kids, we would play Jaws in the pool. Like, each kid got a chance to play the shark. And there was this empowerment for young people to be like, I get to play this, killer shark and tag my friends and whatever that in the pool. So I think that might be something different, because like The Exorcist, like The Exorcist and other like horror type films of that genre or that time, I don't think a lot of people were thinking like, I want to be, the villain. Not until like really, Mike Myers and those slasher films came out that they became the sort of this sick fantasy to be sort of the villain. But there was sort of something compelling that was more organic and natural to feel connected to the shark. I think that's probably why maybe there was something a little bit different of what made Jaws work, the first one anyway.
That's good. I think that's great. I think there's probably a lot of truth to that. So it's essentially, it was a monster that we hadn't quite seen, and it turned out to be an iconic monster that they did then try to knock off. There was Piranha, and then there was
Mako,
the Deep. Yeah. And there was, so they basically did, things that were, and some of those were successful to some extent or another, but they certainly weren't an outlier, amazing, breaking new ground success like Jaws, which was basically an iconic new monster.
Yes.
Okay, so that's so if we have to say one amazing thing that really made it stick out, let's think of it that way. I think
I like
that's going to be very instructive for you when when thinking about your own concept. Okay, let's go down to the next on the list. That's Rudy. Tell me, which I think is an interesting choice because there's a lot of at least from my perspective, there's a lot of movies in that sort of underdog sports genre. Certainly Rocky and Karate Kid, but Rudy comes a little bit later in the series of those sorts of movies. Why does that one stick out to you as a favorite?
Being based on a true story, but I just think that a lot of it too, like all this stuff has like amazing music so underneath it. So you have Jaws, obviously, iconic soundtrack, and Rudy has such one. I think Jerry Goldsmith's one of his best soundtracks, but it's such the underdog because it's like his accomplishments are not to like win the national championship. It's such a small victory in terms of the bigger picture of things, but knowing how that fits into his world, it's so emotionally moving that it's one of those films that it's a common thing between Rudy and like Shawshank Redemption. It's pretty commonplace to meet other men that watch these movies and go, oh yeah, I cry all the time. Like Rudy's like a film that most men cry at, or Shawshank Redemption is like a film that most men cry at. And I love the fact that a film can have that sort of transformative impact, and that's why I put Rudy in there, because I get a kick out of it. I get a kick out of watching it over again, just like the layers of timelessness of the 70s, in Indiana with the fall colors, it's just the struggle to play this game, and how they glorified sort of the big college sport with those gold helmets and the early morning sun and the mist and the dawn, and just like it was just captured really beautifully. And I think there's such a small personal story within all that stuff in this grand scheme of things, because at the time, Notre Dame was like considered like the best of the best of college football. It was like very religious. I think also there's a connection to my father. My father's grew up last name McMahon, an Irish Catholic family in New York, and the Fighting Irish. That's why I remember hearing him talking about. It's the only college team that he would talk about. So there's a sort of a connection there, and seeing this small story happen. So I think that's what resonates so much with me, other than like a Rocky or other sports films.
Got it. So again, I'm hearing the passion behind the main elements and what really makes you feel connected to it. So if you had to boil it down to one thing that was the same but different about Rudy, what might that be from your perspective?
I think it's the something that might seem like a small act or small victory was such a large victory for the story of that family, And I think that because where Rocky was big, where he was challenging the champion of the world, he becomes a champion of the world. We're trying to think of some of the other sports films. Like everything hinged on like a championship. I love the fact that this was small. Like there was a small moment, but these small moments meant something, and I think that's the difference.
I'll say something that I think is. I think you're onto something there. That there's something about it being a true story and it not being about winning the big game. It's really about him playing. So the goal is there's a groundedness and a reality to it that I think people really. It's a palpable goal that people can relate to a little bit more than an underdog boxer fighting the heavyweight champ. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think one of the interesting elements of the original Rocky that actually made it really resonate is that he doesn't beat Creed. He gets to the end of the second act and he's studying that tape of Creed and he goes, I can't beat him. He's too good. But if I can hang in there, then I have a sense of dignity about myself. I will have, if I can get in there and not have him knock me out, if I can go the distance with the champ, that's the thing. So I think there's a similarity between those two things, but I'm hearing that you were drawn to, I think, the groundedness to it, and I would also say it being a college football story. So it was a college football story, but not about winning the national championship, but it's about one particular player with a very sort of grounded, compelling goal that makes that film stand out. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, yes.
Cool. All right, Amadeus.
I think Amadeus is there's this aspect of the musicality. It's sort of like I know it comes from a play, but it's just such an opera for me when I watch that film, and just this, I think the Salieri's character, just the need to be good, but really realizing that he doesn't have the talent as someone that God has gifted this other person that he sees as unfit. I think that's such an amazing sort of take on that story. Obviously maybe not historically correct, but as a storytelling aspect of it, it just I just love the ride. I love when I look at that film, I realize Mozart was a film director of his day. Creating stories and operas, because that was the medium, a visual and, musically and everything like that. So he kind of lived that rock star life, and I don't know, it was one of those films because of the music, because of the dynamic of the protagonist not being sort of this heroic sort of autobiography. I think that's the twist that we see a lot of, musical autobiographies or not autobiographies, but biographies that we see in this sort of genre, to have the aspect of the villain's point of view, this flawed character, this flawed protagonist. I thought that was fantastic. And it did. It transported you to another world and made me as a young person appreciate Mozart or the classical music more so than I ever thought I would. Got it.
All right, good. So one quick thought, and then we'll ask the same but different question. But would you think you could almost say that's a reverse underdog movie? Like you have an underdog who's not getting the credit he deserves, and instead of him sort of overcoming his challenge, he tries to take down the alpha dog. Right?
Yeah.
So, but the seed of it's kind of the same. It's a guy who wants something so badly that he's willing to kind of do anything to get it, and his way is kind of, it's the dark hero way to do it, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah,
okay,
that's the twist, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, I mean, so would you, I'm not so sure that is the same but different. I mean, that's more of sort of a plot, kind of sort of a character arc plot thing, I'm not sure, as sort of a movie package, that's what makes it the same but different. As a concept, we're really talking about, it's like a biopic of Amadeus and his adversary.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was something really compelling about it. I mean, if you had to say as a concept, as a package, what would make it the same but different?
I guess that, I don't know if, I guess it would be like I want to make this movie about the life of Amadeus Mozart, but told from the perspective of his adversary that eventually feels like he, caused the death of his rival. So that's yeah. So
it's the flip of a biopic. Instead of doing the biopic straight from the thing, you're doing the biopic from the antagonist.
Right.
Good. I think that's pretty clean, and I think that was probably pretty fresh when that came out. Nice. Good. All right. Charlie, we're gonna get this moving along here. Somewhere in Time. Tell me what you love about that.
You know what? I never thought I'd. There's like a cult movement for that film in terms of like, there's something spiritual. There's something transformative about this fantasy concept of being lost in time or other dimensions, two people unable to connect in this physical space, but they're able to can get together in another plane, in the astral plane, heaven plane, whatever it might be. But there's that whole adventure of going back in time to then find the love of your life. Now, I saw it as a young, kid, just because I thought I was only watching because of Superman. That was it.
Right.
But it turned me on to this whole world of like, wow, this story was very compelling. And it wasn't sappy, it wasn't like a chick flick type thing. I mean, I guess it could be, but for a young person, there's so many things layered in that. And I love sort of that Twilight Zone aspect, but it had such emotional impact. And so that's what I take away from that film. That still resonates with me today.
Nice. So what's the same but different about it, you think, in terms of what made it stick out at the time?
At the time, I don't think I don't think anybody had seen a love story that dealt with time travel. You know, I think later on we would see like the time traveler's wife or something like that, but and more time travel movies coming out after that. But this one, I can't think of it prior to 1982 or whenever this thing came out. If there was ever like a movie that really dealt with sort of this concept of time travel, and especially layered in the context of a love story. But on top of that, again, you're being transported to sort of the Norman Rockwell, or this, even prior to that, sort of this Americana time. So it's timeless. So Amadeus is like another world, another time that it was done romantically. Rudy was done, during the 70s. How, like I said, it encapsulates the college football experience of a time when Notre Dame was the most revered college for football at that time. And Somewhere in Time has that aspect of it going back to Chicago area, along the lakes during the turn of the century. So it was this timeless feel, like they're going on this journey, and time travel allowed you to do that. So I think that was one of the other aspects that was so attractive about that film.
Nice. I think what you said right up front really kind of encapsulates it. I think it was a time travel love story, and as a concept, that really did stick out. It was kind of the first of its kind. Great. Okay, let's go on to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, well, that one, obviously, it's on top list for so many filmmakers or film lovers and things like that. And it's just, repeated viewing. There's just so many things that layers upon layers that come out of that movie. I think I watched it, first time as a young person, but really just saying, wow, that was pretty trippy. But maybe thinking that it, should be, it just moved at a different pace. But when I got older, I just fell in love with it over and over time, about just simply the element of showing the dawn of man, and that great edit of the bone being thrown up and then cutting to the satellite and showing where man had evolved to. And then ending the movie, at least how I saw it, was the next step of evolution, which is the Star Child. And to me, in all the other aspects of it, like just this fascination with space, again, like a timeless concept of going outside of our world, the sense of the explorer, and seeing that there's something more spiritual or something more transformative in a sense, like where are we going to in terms of the step of evolution. There's just so much. And again, music just plays a huge part of it. It just sweeps through that whole movie. And there's not, I'm sure there's enough essays done on this movie than more I can, did a much better job than I could sum it up. But for me personally, I really enjoyed the bigger picture, this bigger, deeper thought of like, where does man go in terms of the next step of evolution? Nice.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, and Kubrick's my favorite filmmaker, by the way.
Oh,
so,
nice.
Excellent. How is it the same but different?
Well, we're talking 68, so, this is the height of the space race. We haven't gone to the moon yet, so it was one of those things where we hadn't seen space portrayed like this historically ever in a cinematic epic. So it's there's really nothing. It's right in the title. It's like, here it is. This is a space odyssey, and you're gonna sit back and the fact that it's still timeless. They just had a re-showing up here in Portland. Like a 75 millimeter, I think, whatever. It's like they brought it out, and it was sold out, and people, there's still something to be said about this film, and all these films that I listed, to me, they're timeless, and I love the aspect of a film that is timeless.
Yeah, there's something interesting about that, though, is that what I think an aspect of what makes these things timeless is that they took their genre and they put a fresh twist on it in the time, and then it sears into the collective consciousness, and it makes it feel timeless. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think there's a significance about that if you, as a screenwriter, are picking something that's not just as good as what's already out there, but it's taking it a step forward. If there's some element or mix of elements that, at least in your particular view, is like these things you love, but one step better, that quality almost makes it timeless, I think contributes to a sense of timelessness, and it's why some of these things really, hold up after years. So, okay. So, 2001 is spectacular. Let's, because we're running a little low on time. Let's move on to the favorite horror films that are similar in genre to what you're thinking about doing next.
Sure. I wrote down Poltergeist, the original, the 82 version. The remake really missed the mark on that. I said Insidious, but I kind of put Insidious trilogy because actually I think Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are like one movie. And then The Conjuring, obviously that's sort of the tone. So those are the three movies I put down.
Great. So let's go right to the chase with these. Poltergeist, what do you think is the same but different?
Of all the genres, of what made it stood out in all.
When Poltergeist stood out, as a concept, what made that kind of different and special?
Well, again, being like a Spielberg project, it wasn't like a straight down the line horror film because of that time, we were sort of coming out of the collective bastardization of all the films following Halloween. So we had like sort of this slasher horror film. So here was this basically paranormal ghost film and dealing with the concept of paranormal and really just a more glorified expansion of that Twilight Zone episode, Little Lost Girl, and so there's an adventure, there's repeat viewing aspects to it because it's dealing with the bigger question of what happens to us when we pass away and what is it, there's all these just fun aspects of the discovery of the ghost, and then it turns darker. Yes, so that for Poltergeist for me, that was the difference of the time.
How about this? How about it was a haunting in suburbia through the TV, right?
Yeah, yes.
So we hadn't quite seen suburbia. Like I just looked at the trailer recently, and the trailer's talking like in this one house that's similar to all the other houses. There was a sense of suburbia, and to have a scary story in suburbia was kind of, we hadn't seen that yet, right?
That's true.
And then TV and has that sense of commercialism and sameness. I think it came out of that in a sense of the monster we had seen. It was a haunting, it was ghosts, that sort of thing. But the house was kind of different because it was an aspect of suburbia and sameness where there was beginning to be a real sort of rebelliousness and sort of uneasiness with suburbia, right?
And there's within suburbia is really the family, the sort of the nuclear family. Because prior to that, we've seen just basically a lot of teenagers being chopped off. So even like Jaws 2 was like a play on, attacking all the teenagers. So Poltergeist brought it back to like suburbia and family, and a family dealing with, this threat. And that I think that was, at the time, it was different.
Nice. I think it's great. And so one quick review before we do the last two is that as we're getting into these, we're talking about these movies and how much you love them and how they stood out. We're really talking about some bigger themes, bigger ideas. How does it kind of advance the collective conversation? How does it take things further? So these are really important questions to ask when you're in the concepting phase of a new script.
Right.
Because you want something that, again, it's hard enough to do something that's like as good as what's already out there, but you really you have the opportunity to try to take it another step and at least have a defensible position for you personally and say, look, I personally think this movie is not only as good as what's out there because of X, Y, and Z, but I think it's one step better. It's like this, but it's different in this way. Either the monster's different or the setting's different or something is different that makes it really fresh and cool. So that's kind of what we're going for. That's why we're reviewing. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, other than talking about movies, which is really fun. Okay, so let's get to Insidious. Why do you think Insidious was the same but different?
Well, James, how do I say? Like when I first saw it, it was sort of advertised. It just looked like another. I don't know. There was, because horror films at this particular time, there's just so many of them. So it's very hard. So until I sat down actually and watched it, I was, again, the trailer didn't sell it for me. It was just taking the time to actually sit down and watch it. And actually, I watched it because I had seen The Conjuring and was surprised, because the trailer for The Conjuring I really enjoyed. I go, wow, there's something, again, timeless or retro about this presentation of the trailer. So I enjoyed The Conjuring so much that it made me go back and look at James Wan's work, and then it forced me to look at Insidious. And when I saw Insidious, I was like, wow, this is really amazing in terms of the again, it's suburbia, it's a family dealing with, it's like the next level. It's like taking Poltergeist, but taking it the next level of horror, because the visuals that he puts in, and I hate mannequins. So the way he puts sort of this dead look, and Mike Myers was one of the I was so afraid as a young kid of that character. So again, the dead face, the uncanny valley of these characters. So the visuals that he threw in there, just exhilarated me. But the kicker for Insidious, when I saw that film, was this aspect that his writing partner, Lee Walnall, I think is his last name, the aspect of the further. So this astral projection. And growing up, hearing my parents talk about certain things like that, being aware of different planes of existence or that kind of thing, that was an aspect I go, oh, that's neat. So it's not just a possessive demon and just kind of written off half cock. There is some deeper thought put into what does this mean, the further? What does it mean when somebody from the physical world connects with somebody on the other side? What are you inviting in, and what does that look like? So all that stuff really resonated with me in terms of. So then
let me ask you this, because it is this line is in the trailer, and I think it actually might speak to sort of the same but differentness of this movie. The line is, "It's not the house that's haunted; it's your son."
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
And now we've seen Damien from The Omen and Exorcist, so we've seen haunted kids before, but in a sense, it was almost a throwback to that sort of subgenre. And I think then what you're saying is that the son, it wasn't a devil or demon like it was in The Exorcist, but it was this sort of other world, the further, this place, and that kind of, and then it was a fairly heady but kind of logical backstory and mythology, right?
Yeah.
So so I think as a concept, it's actually. It's good, but it's not quite great in a way I think some of these others are.
Yeah.
And I think it was directed really well, and I think the director had to do more heavy lifting than the screenwriter. But what I think my view is it was kind of a shift from not the house but the son, and then the son was. Dealing with this sort of otherworldly, was actually a portal almost, for the monster to come in. So there's a bit of a twist on the monster, monster and location in a sense. So that's that. And then The Conjuring, I would say, again, fairly subtle in terms of not breaking too new ground as a concept, but I think the 70s period was a little different. It was a true story, which you've heard a lot, but there was something about the sort of commitment to the true story, and those main characters, and them being kind of the most famous ghost hunters. So it did put a new spin on the haunted house genre, but it was a fairly subtle spin, I think, as far as concepts go. But it was a little different. So I think anyway. So that's my take on that. So with that being said, as all sort of a groundwork and a sort of just to get your mind going on A, what you love most, and then B, what you kind of want to do with your thing. Tell me where you're at with the kernel of the idea after all the work you did originally and the comments you got from the Brain Trust and what you've been thinking about since then. Tell me about the kernel of the idea that you're thinking about right now.
Well, it all stems with this concept of a little girl that has connected to. It went for a lot of different iterations. The first one was that I kind of want to deal with this concept of the guardian angel, like, we have a good entity. Like, what does that look like? And if you could have a direct connection with this guardian angel, as opposed to it's like more mysterious, and then when you're being attacked by something of the other side that is more insidious or demonic in nature. With Insidious, they kind of went in, they'd never been there before, but they had to fight their way out. With Poltergeist, it was, again, a more exaggerated, it was a more enhanced version of the Twilight Zone's Lost Little Girl. In The Conjuring, it was, again, a family unit being attacked or by this, the demonic forces and things like that. But I kind of wanted to take the next step further. If somebody from the physical plane goes into the other world with backup, like that's what my friend Alex was saying. It's like if you knew that you had this special connection to a sort of guardian angel type thing, entity, or you're a relative, and you could come into the underworld or the other world and do battle to some extent with a demonic force, what would that look like? So I just want to kind of take it the next step. When I'm inspired by all these things. And the bigger question, which is like when I mentioned Somewhere in Time in 2001, is, what does that look like? And how rooted in science or like, realistic concepts could that be like, as opposed to being completely fantasy based? So that's the kernel I've got going right now.
Got it. Okay, good. So, I heard that from the Brain Trust, and I thought, and I think that is a cool element. The idea of having an ally, is kind of the word they might use in storytelling, circles.
Right.
An ally that's a guardian angel. That's great. The problem is that that's a fairly minor element, right? Because the guardian, unless the guardian angel is the protagonist, and then you're kind of thinking of a concept, that's kind of a different way to go. But when you're concepting, ultimately you want to get to a point where you have your protagonist, who's it about, and it could be the family, or it could be somebody in the family, or it could be teens or whatever, and then you have the monster, and then you have the house. Right, those are the three main elements. Plus, there's sin. Right.
Yeah.
With Jaws, the sin was they didn't want to close the beach, even though they knew there was this monster in the water. It was the summer season; they needed money, and so it's understandable, but it was still greed, and that led to the monster basically being unleashed.
Yeah.
So you really want to concept with those four sort of elements in mind: a house, an interesting monster, who the protagonist is, and then a sin that unleashes the monster. I don't think the protagonist doesn't necessarily have to directly unleash the beast, but there has to be sort of significant involvement. So those are the kind of things that I would invite you to kind of play with, and I think your kernel is fine as an element, but it's not enough to kind of really build a house on. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like a really cool part of your house, but I would start playing with different ideas that are kind of playing with twists on those four main building blocks. What if the protagonist was this, or what if it was that? What if the monster was more like this, or more like that? What if the house was, in the snowy wilderness of Alaska or whatever? Oh, one other thought, because you're thinking of doing this in, where on your own, making it yourself with your own resources. I would seriously think about any sort of local traditions or settings or places. Is there like a particularly interesting and distinct warehouse or some sort of location that's distinct to that particular region? That's another way to kind of give something a real distinct flair. Or a legend that happens kind of around there, and maybe it's your city, or it's in your family or your past or something. But something like that is a way to kind of find a real distinguishing way to distinguish the concept. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
So I think there's probably a pretty good stopping point for now. And then I would invite you to kind of play with it. Kind of come up with a few different concepts. Maybe with 3 to 5 would probably be enough. And then we can kind of pick it up once you have those, and we can go down the list of each of those. And I can say, okay, here's what I think is strong about that one. Here's what, and then we can kind of, and I think that's probably the next step. The other thing that's a really good idea, and this came from Blake Snyder's book, the Save the Cat guy.
Oh,
yeah. He talks about irony, that a really good movie concept often has that sense of irony, so that the protagonist has this goal, he's blocked by the antagonist, and there's a sense of irony that happens with it, and it's all in there within that one log line, and it makes it, and that irony makes people kind of lean in, or makes the idea almost expand or bloom in your mind, just as a frickin' concept, And the other important thing, I guess we could kind of end with, is getting a really great concept to start with. It not only does it make your screenwriting process much stronger and more sort of sturdy and easier when it comes time to actually get people to watch the film or get people involved in the film, and you need to pitch it to them by email or by verbally or wherever, or when you're done with it, you're getting people to download it or wherever. If you can pitch it in that one concept that you loved from the beginning, if it's a really good concept at the end, it makes the marketing easier. It makes attaching people easier. It makes everything from writing to making the movie literally 2 to 3 times, if not more, easier if the concept itself is really good. So
right.
That's my pitch, my passionate pitch for concepting. I think you're off to a really good start because I feel like you really got into some sense of your passions around these movies that you loved. You got a sense of what was making them stand out. I think the time is right. I think you should go off on your own and think about some ideas, and don't worry about any ideas being bad or whatever, because sometimes an idea comes out and most of it's terrible, but there's a piece of it that actually is pretty good. And if you want to put that down and pitch it, then maybe that can grow into something that does boom, then set up as a great concept.
Okay, so now what you heard was my initial session with Brooks Elms as he helped me start over from the conceptual stage or the concepting stage, but starting with films that I liked and why I connected to them. He's helping me get back to the root of why I want to make movies in the first place, or what kind of stories I want to tell. And you will have your own, reasons and your own, obviously personal connection to movies, but hopefully you can use this process to start there and then figure out what kind of concepts you can create from this initial session or this initial step. So what you're going to hear now is a short 15-minute session that I had with my Brain Trust group where I presented the concepts that I just started to write about. And so that's what you're going to hear. And hopefully they'll give you an idea of how you can go about writing your story, finding your concepts. Before you even write, the script or go too far down the path, is stop and think about the concepting stage, whether or not it is as solid as you think it is. Anyhow, so here it is, the 15 minutes with my Brain Trust where I present these ideas after, having my session with Brooks Elms. So he reached out to me. We did an initial session where he essentially asked me, let's go back to the concepting stage. Because I remember, Buff, you talked about this before. You were like, my script might be at the stage where I might need to go back to the concept. And that's what, Ferrari, you mentioned it too, about, getting backup, what if you could connect with your dead relatives and have backup and things like that. So I'm at this concepting stage. So I just wanted to use my short time here to just show you some of these concepts, just to get your initial reaction. And I'll show you what he did for me, which was the initial interview was that he asked me, tell me 5 of your favorite films. They don't have to be in the same genre that you're trying to write. So I shared the 5 favorite films with him, and then we discussed deeper, what was unique about that? What is that? Just a little bit deeper discussions of what it meant to me personally. Then he asked me, what are 3 favorite horror films of the same genre that I'm trying to write? And so I gave those sort of examples. And then my task is that I'm supposed to just brainstorm concept ideas, like go back to the drawing board and just to see if there's something in the concepting area in terms of writing log lines that doesn't like spark, that jumps off the page. Like that's what you should be writing. And this is sort of a play off of Blake Snyder's Save the Cats type stuff, where each log line you're trying to find that irony, you know. So there's there's irony in each sentence. So with that, I'm going to share with you guys this my screen. So my five favorite films, and then these are the log lines that I wrote for my 5 favorite films, trying to find the irony in each of the stories. So a sheriff who has a fear of the ocean must hunt down a man-eating shark before it kills more people on the island. Obviously, that's Jaws. So the irony,
Sharknado.
Yes. So the irony is that the hero, the protagonist, has a fear of the ocean, and yet he has to enter the ocean to kill the beast. An undersized underdog must overcome the greatest of obstacles to have a chance at playing one game for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Rudy.
I still tear up every fucking time.
Yeah.
Fucking Rudy. Fucking Rudy.
So there's the irony, is like someone who's completely not, meant to play football is, that's the story. An envious music composer inadvertently kills his brilliant rival when he secretly commissions him to write an opera for his dead father, who has haunted him with guilt, Amadeus. So the irony there is someone who's envious of his rival, actually pays him to write probably one of his greatest operas and then kills him in the process. A man must find his way back in time to find his one true love somewhere in time. Obviously, now we're dealing with supernatural, and there's an added element of time travel. And then when a mysterious monolith appears at the dawn of man, and then much later when mankind has evolved to land on the moon, it sends humanity off on a mission to find the next monolith. However, mankind must outrace the artificial intelligence it has created before it evolves and reaches the next monolith. 2001: A Space Odyssey. So these are just films that I've always come back to because I just love them. And the process of writing out these log lines, now, trying to find that irony or find that uniqueness of them. And then the 3 favorite horror films of the same genre, I wrote: a suburban American family must find their daughter who has been abducted by a ghostly entity and pulled into another dimension somewhere inside the house, Poltergeist. And then a woman with psychic abilities must fight off her demons in order to help a family whose lives are threatened by an evil entity. That's both The Conjuring 1 and 2, like kind of the same theme. And then the other one is: a father must journey into the land of dead spirits called the Further to save his son's soul from the clutches of a demonic being. And that's both Insidious Chapter 1 and 2. So it's interesting because when we talked about these films, he mentioned that both the Conjuring and the Insidious may not have the strongest sort of ironic log line, and that shows you sort of the power of the director, like how good he is in that genre. Anyhow, so here are these concepts. This is the concept brainstorming. I'm just going to throw these out to you guys, and then I'll stop, and then I just get your reactions, just like gut reactions from it, because either they're working or they're not working, and I got to hit the writing board again. Concept 1: an angel must prevent a living person from being killed, that person being her former self. Concept 2: a vengeful spirit attempts to possess a young girl only to discover that she is protected by her dead twin sister's soul. Concept 3: a young girl who suffers from nyctophobia, fear of the dark, must fight off a demonic spirit who only attacks in the dark. Concept 4: an asthmatic young girl alone in the house must connect with her dead twin sister's soul to help fight off a vengeful spirit before it possesses her. Concept 5: a troubled young boy who witnesses the death of his sister from the hands of a vengeful spirit. Discovering that he is also marked to die in 1 week's time, the boy must enlist a group of misfitted paranormal enthusiasts to help him enter the other world to save his sister's soul and his own. So, I can bring these back up, but
my favorite's 4.
Number 4.
I really like the first one, Scott.
Okay.
I felt like, just as a general note, some of these are a little bit repetitive, just as a first. And perhaps it's because you were so succinct with the first one in your execution of the actual concept, that there's not a lot to get lost on guys like me with the shortest attention span. And I feel like you really hit it. For some reason, that really struck me as a really unique concept.
Okay.
And there's some irony built into it too, because what happens if the angel prevents themselves from dying? Do they cease to exist? That's weird.
Yeah. It's a little heady.
Yeah, but I like it. It's
meta.
Meta. There you go.
And obviously it's filtered through my own, all of us, it's filtered through our own biases.
So like, it's like imagining if you were trying to read through like what you're going to watch tonight. Bullets and Buff, do you have any ideas between the 5 concepts?
Definitely number 4.
4, okay.
My only thing with the number 4 was asthmatic. I'm not sure where the payoff was. I'm sure that there's a huge payoff, but I don't know if that's something that would strike me as like, oh, I want to watch this asthmatic young girl. I mean, I just assume that a young girl alone in a house is scary on its own accord.
Yeah.
But that's just
Well, yes, I'm just imagining. I mean, these are just concepts. I mean, I imagine Scott's going to again evolve these log lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're trying. That's I think the idea of this brainstorming session is simply to go, there's something there, like dig deeper in there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, number 4 for me, I like the asthmatic young girl because I'm a visual guy, so I just brought it right to my head. The asthmatic thing just showed me a young girl's weak, but an asthmatic young girl is even weaker.
Yeah.
So it's so that's why I gravitated to it first of all, because there's a weakness there, and I'm like that she's more in peril and she's more defenseless. So that one little word asthmatic, that's what drew me to it, as opposed to the other guys. And also this is the cleanest one for me. It just went straight to the point of what it was. So you established there was a young girl, a weak young girl on top of that, because they're strong young women.
Yeah.
So this is a weak young girl alone in a house, dead twin sister to fight off of it. I mean, it's like it's as straight as an arrow as you can get about what this concept is. While like 5 was a little bit more meandering, a little bit, it got a little too convoluted. And then I just like this one. I thought it was just the most most direct.
Yeah, I think there's something in 5 here. I think you could just
there's stuff in there. There's fun. There's something fun in that one with the
misfit. Yeah, you could almost get rid of the first sentence or combine it with the second. I would say that one can be distilled down to a little bit more.
But then the thing, if this is a horror movie, the group of misfit paranormal enthusiasts is funny to me. So all of a sudden it turns into Ghostbusters. In my mind, when I read that, I was like, okay, so this is not a horror movie anymore. This is kind of like, maybe it's a funny horror movie. It's not. It opens up a little. It opens up that one little sentence opens up the world of comedy to me.
Gotcha.
While concept 4 is there's no arguing what that is.
Okay, and I don't know. Buff is always good if he's still there. Is he still there? I can't see because I'm looking at my
pressure's on. Yeah, I agree that 4 is good because of the simplicity. But the thing that I always think of, and I don't necessarily like to think about a screenplay in terms of the concept. I like to think in terms of the premise,
Okay.
And it might sound like it's the same thing, but in terms of what I would connect to with the story, and even though that I think that is something that could work, the thing that I would dig a little deeper for is the universal concept behind the story versus what the actual details of that is. So this is the details of this story. But what I'm looking for is like, I don't necessarily connect to any of these because we're not connecting with like a universal kind of fear concept. So when you put like Jaws, there's like a universal fear there, and I don't know if that necessarily works for this, but that's the only thing that I would say about it. I think every one of these stories could potentially work. 4 is the strongest.
Yeah.
But I would just say tapping into the universality. And I mean, I'll use my own thing as an example. Not that it's a perfect example, but when I was trying to put together a short film, I was just trying to focus on something that every single person that watches it will watch it and say, I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to wake up and what would that feel like for that to happen. So I think that's good. I mean, the concept number 4 is good, but think about the universality of the story that you're telling, because as I've always, put on the podcast and everything, we're always retelling stories, and there should be a long line of storytelling that goes behind what the story is with that, even though the details are different.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. No, this has been really helpful. I just wanted to have an opportunity to sort of record this little nugget, and then, well, this will go into like the podcast because this is like the series because I'm meeting up. What's that?
I didn't know that. Okay.
No, it's all good. I mean, like, it's everybody's feedback because then what it is then the Brooks who I'm working with, will go through it and like because it gives me a chance to like rework these. And I'm just
Can I make a recommendation, Scott, real quick. I really got a lot, and nobody seems to ever mention this book. Maybe it's I don't know what the deal is, but I think Pilar Alessandra's book, The Coffee Table Screenwriter, might be something you get a lot out of because that does exactly what I think you like doing, which is kind of workshopping ideas.
Yeah.
And it does things like taking, for example, the end of your film and then working backwards through a lot of different kind of little activities that you can do to start fleshing out your story, you know? And I remember reading that just before I did the interview with her. And I was just kind of gushing about how cool it was to be able to work on your screenplay, starting from the end, and then, take you through all the different things that happen to get to that ending, and it's just all these different kind of hacks so that you can start seeing your story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. The whole concepting idea of what we're doing here is Tim Ferriss is famous because he put out Google ads for the different names of the 4-Hour Workweek. Because they tested it, like he would test things, products that didn't exist, because he just wanted to see what rose to the top. And so it's almost like this. It's like the movie Clown. Now the guy who's directing the next Spider-Man movie, what's his name? Eli Roth picked up because he made a joke trailer about a new movie from Eli Roth called Clown, and it got such viral hits on it, and then it got to Eli Roth's attention that he actually met with the guys who made it, and then they developed the feature film Clown that came out, and that same guy got the job to direct the next Spider-Man movie. So it's interesting because you can do these little things to sort of test out the market. We're talking about Robert Rodriguez, Machete. It was like the biggest faux, fake trailer there was, but people wanted to see it. It's like testing out the market. So this is interesting. The concept idea, like you said, I'll dig deeper. I love Pilar, so I'll check out her book. But yeah, it's all really helpful. I can't thank you guys enough for just taking the time.
But at the end of the day, you need to pick something that you really just go, yes. Oh, this. I mean, you're gonna have to be a fucking cheerleader for like a year. Being like, this is the best movie ever. And there's going to probably be a lot of people that go, I don't get it. I think this is stupid. It's a piece of shit. I mean, and it could be the best movie ever made. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter what we say. I mean, you can bounce ideas off us all day, but I mean, you have to really kind of be like this. I want to tell you this story and I'm going to tell you why, it's going to be something that's worth your time,
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys so much. No, Buff. Like you brought this up to me before. Like you could tell. Like there's something deeper that I got to tap into to like.
Yeah. I think you definitely have a really good screenwriter in you, and it's. I mean, I've been on the same journey, man. I mean, I've written so many screenplays that were just kind of like, okay, I'm kind of copying this, or I'm copying that, or I'm trying to do this, and then once you finally hit your kind of nerve, like you get right into. It's like there's a lot of figuring out who you are, and you put that kind of stuff into your writing, and you can feel it. It's like you're attached to the page, and you can manipulate people, and where they are in the story and everything. And it's hard to do because you only get those moments. Rarely you end up writing thousands of pages and you whittle it down to just the best stuff, like you're doing a sculpture or something. But I think you're on the right road of kind of like finding your voice and feeling more confident, I think.
Very cool. Well, whatever happens today, this has been super helpful for me. So that concludes my very special episode, or this very special episode, at least part one of it, of how to find your next movie concept. And as you saw with Brooks, he wanted me to start from the beginning of like why I even love movies in the first place and why I love these particular movies. And then use that as an inspiration and a foundation for coming up with concepting ideas for my next film. And then the cool thing was to be able to share this or have a sounding board with my brain trust that I put together to see whether or not what I came up with, had any impact or not. So hopefully you found some value in that, or maybe you're stuck writing your film, or maybe you're writing something that isn't, responding to readers. So you want to be able to go back and rework it. And hopefully these techniques help. And as mentioned, if you want to get hold of Brooks Elms, and contact him yourself for, your own, consultation, then actually just email me at scott@filmtrooper.com, and I will make a personal invitation or personal, introduction on email to Brooks for you. So again, just email me at scott@filmtrooper.com, and I'll set that up for you. Okay, with that said, I look forward to seeing you in the second part of this series of how to find your next movie concept. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me and listen and support Film Trooper. It's very, very much appreciated. And I will see you next time.
Film Trooper, filmmaking freedom for the independent.